I'm with Astronomer. I am currently a PMC member, and outside of Airflow, I also do some other like Python adventures. Most significantly, Python packaging. So if you do have any complaints, please do not come to me. You are wrong. Python packaging is good now. And I also organize community like events in Taiwan. And specifically for Airflow, I am involved in like a lot of things you might want to complain about, like timetables, dynamic task mapping. I heard someone complaining about task mapping, like just behind me in the session previously. I am not sure if they're aware I'm responsible for all their problems, but I'm also the one responsible for renaming execution day. So if your DAG breaks, that's my fault. And also assets, which is the root of a lot of problems. I have gotten a lot of conversations, I guess. I planned this talk sort of at the end of Airflow Summit last year because we had a lot of like interest in how event-driven scheduling would work, and I sort of drafted the outline of this talk to just discuss how we came where we are now and where we should be going next. But a year passed, and I've attended like 5 event-driven scheduling talks in this Airflow Summit alone, and I kind of feel like a lot of people just already have a good idea of where we are now. So I am not sure what to do now. So okay, what are assets really? Like I put this here because like people sort of didn't understand, but people seem to actually do. Like it used to be dataset. We introduced it in Airflow 2.4, I believe. And we took the name from Open Lineage, which is since I don't know when, like a long time ago. We've had a thing called dataset from Open Lineage integration since like a very long time ago, probably 1 point something before I got involved. It basically means that it's a place where some data live, which is how Open Lineage tend to interpret dataset. It can be a database table, it can be a CSV file somewhere, etc. And but for Airflow and Open Lineage, I guess more importantly, it represents the data itself that lives in that location. Right, that's what we actually care about. We don't really care about the table name and the database name. We really care about the data inside that table. And there's also dataset event, which is like a thing that gets created when you do something with that dataset. For example, if you insert a new row to the table, and it signifies there's an update. But here comes the problem. When we introduced this dataset event, we didn't really consider Open Lineage. Sort of Open Lineage. Who uses Open Lineage really? There are a few hands. You know, Open Lineage also has an idea of events, and that's different from this, right? Like in Open Lineage, you have a like start event that signifies when I am going to start updating a data set, and there's an like update event that gets created when I finish updating event and something should react to that thing. But dataset event is sort of just an update event. There's no other kinds of events. Other kinds of events is sort of signified by DAG run states, right? I started a DAG run. So that creates a problem. Like there was a talk today, I believe, that talk about this is actually a problem because dataset in Airflow is not dataset in Open Lineage, and and there are actually other datasets from other systems, and everyone gets confused. So Airflow needs its own terminology. And to be honest, I didn't buy this like last year because you just call it Airflow datasets, right? It's different from like Open Lineage datasets, obviously. But is Constance here? Oh, I hope not. Like she sort of forced me to change it because basically like the root problem of Airflow datasets is that the name dataset is just not really accurate to what Airflow actually does with data sets, right? Like for Airflow, we don't really only represent data with data sets. It's more like just a thing, right? Like I updated a thing and I want to be represent the thing. And like for some use cases for Airflow, for example, machine learning, which was a big topic last year, this time, less, no, it seems less this year, but still, like they talk about that they have models. There's like model is data. There's no, it's not. Like my training set is data. My model is not data. I don't want to have this conversation, so let's just change the name. So like, okay, we decide to change the name to what, right? Like it needs to be vague, but it can't be too vague. Like we can't just call it object, right? So what do we call it? Okay, there happens to be another project that has a similar idea to what we're trying to describe right now. I haven't heard the name mentioned in this conference for whatever reason. It's called Daxter. You might have heard of it. They call it assets, so we call it assets. I get a lot of like problems about we sold it. Like, what's the problem? It it made a good decision. All right. So that's where we're now. We have assets. We have asset events. We have asset something. Oh, by the way, I proposed resource and Constance hated it. And I guess she made a good decision because resource is a lot of characters to type. Right. Okay. So now we have asset event, asset alias, and there are actually some like more things that we can talk about. And when we do events, we have a concept of what produces a task, which is the thing that produces the event for the asset. And we can have consuming tags, which is what gets triggered when an asset gets created and the tag depends on the asset. And you can also attach metadata to an event. So when a consuming tag gets triggered by the event, it can read the extra metadata from the event to do something accordingly if it wants to. And we also have asset watcher, which you have heard, I hope, multiple times during the conference. So I'll just skip that. Okay, so this is an asset, and you can use an outlet to like say that I just created a thing in that, and the downstream can just use it, and you can use this context triggering asset event to access the metadata. And we also have alias. For example, if I want to like represent a bunch of files in a bucket, I don't need to like just create them one by one. I can just say this task emits to, oh, I forgot to highlight the outlet there. You need to just read it yourself. Like outlet to S3 bucket, which is an alias, not the individual assets. But inside the task, I can just say, oh, I want to associate a given asset to that specific alias. And the good thing for that is in the downstream tag, I can either depend on that asset directly, the first one, the process Monday, and the second one, I can simply depend on the alias and rely on the actual metadata to just link them up. And when the output to example tag runs, the process everything would also fire. If you don't know that, that's a contribution from Wei. As a watcher, I'll just skip this because you already know this. If you don't, go listen to the recordings. One thing I haven't heard Vincent mention is you can check whether an event is emitted from a watcher or from a DAC. Is you use the extra get from trigger. If this is true, it's from a watcher. One thing we also added that is relatively unknown is asset ref, So you don't need to always use the same example object to reference to have a reference to the asset. You can just asset ref and use that. That's a typo. It should be asset.ref name equal example. So you reference the asset by name. You can also reference it by URI, but that's a lot more characters. Okay, so that's where we are now. Skipping some details. Where we're going is probably what everyone's more interested about. One thing I want to make clear is this is what I want to do to assets. It does not. It does not. It partially aligns to what astronomer wants to do. Is what how I'll put it. That's my community hat on right now. Okay, this is what I want to do personally to Airflow. It might not actually happen if I don't have the support. So if you want something happen, just clap louder later, I guess. Yeah. Okay, so thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so the first thing I want to do is to have better integration with from assets to like other parts of Airflow. Currently, like asset is used for event scheduling, but it still feels a little bit like bolted on. Otherwise, right? Like you when you write to a well, there are examples. We should just take a look at them. This is an example of using an object storage path, which is like introduced sometime last year. So basically, you can define an asset and use the URI to create a path and use that path to write to S3, right? But that's for like an S3 or just a file. What happens if you have a like database to write to? We can't do that. So, but what I want to propose is like you should have some kind of helper that can help you do that. So basically, you can connect to it and you can insert to it, and you can just write, connect it back, and just read the table out as pandas and things like that. And if you have an interface to read or write to an asset by URI, shouldn't we just be able to interact directly to the asset? Because right now, if you have that this example asset example client, like you need to maintain two interface to the same thing, and you need to like make sure you don't type out the wrong thing. Like if you have three assets and three clients, like you don't mix them up and or forget to define the correct outlets and inlets. So what I have in mind right now is we should have something called IO manager that can just directly use the asset object. That's one thing I want to do. And also, like, if we have an IO manager, maybe instead of using the asset, we can just like return something and get that directly like inserted into my database, something like that. Maybe it can interact with partition. So like if I insert like this block of data into my database, that's a partition that can be auto metadata that's used in a downstream that gets triggered. Yeah, better metadata. Validation, which I believe is already going to happen in 3.2 or 3.3 or something. I'm not in charge of that, but who knows like where astronomer will put me into. And also partitions, which I am more involved with. And we have a rough idea of how partition should work. There will be a later slide. And also watermarking. Vincent talked about how we should extend asset watcher to be able to, for example, watch database updates, but use a sort of state variable to prevent Airflow from emitting the same event for the same update, emitting repeated events for the same update over and over again. And the same variable can be used for watermarking, which is basically like you can record where the partition state is in currently. So the next time you update the asset, you can compare the two watermarks to know what got what has got updated. And also like structure extra, all these by how asset is designed now would go into the asset event extra, which is just a dict. And I showed you that you can use from trigger to check whether an asset is from a watcher or not. I lied because even if you trigger an event from a DAG, you can just set that to true and lie to your downstreams. I'm not sure if that's a good idea. Maybe it is, like for testing purpose, maybe. But I want something more strict and more structured than just the dict where everyone can write anything to. Okay, validation. To be clear, this is not to replace validation frameworks like Great Expectations and stuff. This is for like lightweight critical errors. Like I expect this asset right to always have, like for example, these two columns. And if the columns are missing, the test will just blow up right now. It shouldn't write. Right, we can do that if we have the IO manager thing and if all the write is directly integrated into Airflow. And like if it's like more like logical errors, you should still do that in a separate operator down somewhere else. Partitions, the idea is to do this with like integrating into backfills. So we should be able to check whether an asset is like partially satisfied, and like if something is missing when I run a backfill, I should be able to like just fill those specific gaps instead of needing to signify a complete update to the asset. So my downstream needs that, oh, only these parts have been updated. Now that's what downstream selectivity means. And I also want to be able to see that in the UI, obviously. Like I want to be able to see that this is my asset, these are red, oh, these are green. So I need to like take care of these. Watermarking, I mentioned that before. Like some people would say this is close enough to partitions, and in a sense you're right, but it's also different enough. We feel like regardless whether this is combined with the concept of partitioning, we should be able to, like the user should be able to choose how they see their data, whether it is partitioned or watermarked. And watermarking compared to partition, which is like have some predefined grids on your assets, it should focus more on the latest state and the next state. All right, so some words before I hopefully hand some time back to you. First thing, I love this. Like I love doing this work on assets because it's like breaking a lot of new grounds for everyone. And I want to design this for the crowd, and I also want to take as much advice and opinion ideas from the crowd. So we sort of design as a crowd instead of just me and others I work with doing the work. Thank you.